Pookie, you're making your YouTube debut.
Hey everybody, welcome to Futurocracy, the place where we have discussions about ideas and solutions from a data-driven perspective. Our goal is to imagine the possibilities for a future that's more equitable for everyone. So thanks for joining us. My name is Leslie, and I'm joined by Nick and the Futurocracy team. Today we'll be taking a dive into the issue of safety and gaslighting within our society. So just to introduce myself, I'm a licensed counselor, a mom, and an Aikido fanatic.
And I'm a history buff, wordsmith, and all-around solutionist. With us for this conversation is the Futurocracy team. Kimberly, producer, organizer, and strategist. Brian, comic relief, and fill in the blank.
And I'm Rocky of the tech support for the team. Please feel free to use the chat for any questions that you have, and I'll try to bring them up as many as I can.
So welcome everyone to Futurocracy. We focus on conversations about poverty, politics, and the future of our society. We highlight data related to current issues so we can have thoughtful, solution-oriented discussions. Hopefully, you can learn a few things that might inspire you in your own circles to be part of the solutions. You can find links to all the data we bring up today on the data resource page. It's on our website that's linked in the description. So let's get started with some information and data. We love data here, and we want to bring you the facts so we can have a great discussion today. So safety is a large topic, but we can generally think of safety in physical or emotional terms. You might have heard of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Abraham Maslow proposed that until we have physical safety, nothing else matters. Not food, not shelter, not relationships, none of it. And safety, or not, can be thought of as active or passive. I don't think anybody would be confused that we are actively in danger. We're actively unsafe if we're being chased by a bear. That's an active lack of safety. But we're still in a dangerous and precarious situation if we're stranded in the woods with a lot of bears. We may not see them, but we risk an unsafe encounter at any time.
So is that like you're saying, like $400 emergencies, like my transmission went out, my car needs repair, I got a speeding ticket or a red light ticket because I was too busy, I was rushing on my way to work, all those things because 67% of Americans can't handle a $400 emergency? Is that also what you're talking about?
That would be the passive danger. The danger's this close, and we're not sure when it's going to drop, but we know it's going to at some point. Yeah. It's not the sexy stuff that like reporters and politicians amp up. They want to talk about the active danger all the time because it works for them for us to feel unsafe, right? It keeps us engaged. It keeps us clicking. If they scare us, their ratings go up. And if their ratings go up, they're able to sell ad space at a premium. Wars, bank failures, weather balloons, things like that. I mean, you know the drill. But lots more people are passively unsafe in ways that do tons of harm, but get way less coverage. So what you're pointing to, Brian, is financial precarity. And this hits people on so many levels. We've kind of organized our economy so that we have basic needs. That's the case. But we've organized the economy so you can only get those needs to stay alive if you can get enough money to make that work. And we've accelerated the process over the last number of years to make it less and less possible that people can provide for themselves these basic needs, especially since, COVID. I saw a thing, it's an article called U.S. Income Equality Statistics to Know in 2023, so it was put out this year. According to the Fed, the top 1% has as much wealth as the bottom 90% combined. So the top 1% has as much as the bottom 90%. And that in the last 40 years, $50 trillion has moved up to the 1% from the bottom 90%. Yes, I see that face, Kimberly. So if you don't have enough money to access your basic needs, obviously your physical well-being's at risk. If you can't eat, you can't take care of yourself. But you also suffer emotionally as well. I think a lot about this as a counselor. And there was this fabulous study, this link will be in there. It's called A Town with No Poverty: The Health Effects of a Canadian Guaranteed Annual Income Field Experiment. This was put out in 2011. But it was amazing what giving people a little bit of money did for the whole community's mental health. So this kind of sort of Damocles hangs over so many people, and it takes a huge toll on our physical and mental health. It makes it really hard to stay connected to others, and it affects our families. It sets our kids up for lives of financial precarity, of poor mental health and physical health. I mean, it literally lowers our IQ. And it makes it really hard for us to strategize and plan ahead or be involved. And so that drumbeat, that cycle of poverty goes on. There's a article that we'll link called The Intersection of Extreme Poverty and Familial Mental Health that was published in 2017 that addresses that in particular.
So basic needs is a major part of safety. So what does it mean to have enough money to be able to access those basic needs, to be able to thrive, to be able to live and on this earth, to exist?
Well, I mean, we've got all like the basics. Like, obviously, you need to have food to put in your mouth. Whether it's good or not is kind of up for debate. Housing, transportation, all the things that within the housing keep it running, like water, trash, main power, gas, if you're electric, all that stuff. Then obviously your incidentals, the stuff that makes you look presentable when you go out into the world, so people don't assume that you're unhoused. And then your personal tech, which allows you to be a contributing member to society, like internet, computers, technology, because so much of what we do today has transferred from you being in the physical plane to a virtual plane. And so a lot of that kind of handicaps you because so you have to make a living somehow. And then additionally, on top of that, healthcare. I feel like there's probably so many other things that you guys probably can't even think of that I'm not mentioning.
Yeah. I mean, even along with healthcare, I need glasses, so I have to see a vision specialist. And, healthcare is also including mental health care. Let's just make that clear.
Wait, so you're saying that people need to be like mentally, emotionally okay as well as physically alive? Like that matters?
Well, that's my opinion, but
Well, it's such a loop because if if our mental health is suffering, it makes it really hard to pay attention to our physical health. If our physical health is suffering, we often have mental health impacts. So all of that is so intertwined. Why we keep pretending these are two separate things. I mean, it's the same reason somehow dental and eye isn't the same as health insurance, isn't covered under health insurance.
Not like actually included.
Right.
I would imagine this stuff is probably even more expensive if you're in a situation where you have less resources or if, God forbid, you're in poverty. Is that right?
Right. All that stuff costs money.
Yeah. Dude,
Absolutely.
it totally costs money to be in poverty, right? Like, dude, if I want to go to Costco and spend a bunch of hundreds and hundreds of dollars on a bunch of stuff, I personally can't do that because I don't have enough cash to do that. But
hypothetically,
but hypothetically, I could theoretically save a lot of money over time because I was buying a bunch of stuff in bulk. But also, I have to have the storage space to store all that stuff, and that's not always available to everyone.
And the money to pay for the membership.
Oh yeah, that too.
Right, because actually the whole system is set up that the most expensive thing to be in our society is poor, because you can't buy on price. You have to buy on demand.
Yeah.
And then your interest is then also you have to pay the highest interest rates because you don't have great credit. And you can't buy in bulk because you don't have the storage. And then when you do buy, your interest rate's higher, so it's going to cost you more in the long run, and it's going to take you longer to pay it off, if you're able to even pay it off. And our whole economy is actually going towards a subscription service for everything.
Yeah, totally.
But also, or you have to buy the cheapest version of whatever. just
Right.
because that's how much cash you have. Now,
Well, and
you're
Yeah.
then
going to
then
have
it's
to
going to
buy
fail, and then it's going to fail on you in half the time, or
or less.
or less, than something that costs twice as much, but that will last you 4 times longer.
Hmm.
Right, it's like that transition from essentially a society of owners to a society of renters, basically, that you keep hearing about in different ways. Because
And,
obviously, the longer you rent something out, you're feeding a bottomless pit. Because at the end of the day, you don't own anything, and that's obviously what subscriptions. That's why it's so effective for corporations to switch to that, because you don't have to worry about a physical product that people need.
oh,
Yeah.
and it's
Well, and
more
even
insidious. It's more insidious than that because when you go to a subscription service or a rental service, corporations can then now leverage that income out into perpetuity to acquire more capital, to acquire more things that then they can um, rent out as a subscription service. And individuals cannot compete at that kind of scale because I can't do that, but a corporation can. And so then they actually end up taking over more and more of the market and make us more and more serfs upon our land as they are our landlords and service
Yeah,
providers.
and that's degrading. It doesn't provide people with an opportunity to seek happiness. And to me, like happiness is a part of an essential life, right? Like you have to be able to um experience the contrast of darkness and strife and all of that in order to have a fulfilling life. So getting having friends and being a part of community and having connections is all really important.
And
Experiencing the arts and all that stuff is
and for
so.
that, if we're all in that subscription and having to keep the grind going, we
Yeah.
can't build those connections. We can't go out and do service in our community. We can't build meaningful relationships and community around us
Mm-mm.
because we're just, nose to the grindstone to keep this machine that we're literally cogs or bricks in the wall that perpetuate this long divide between
Yeah.
us all.
Yeah,
One of
wow. It
the
seems
things,
like.
yeah, go,
Go
Rocky.
ahead.
No, go.
I, I was just thinking. It seems like ironically, the cycle of poverty almost seems like it kind of deprives people of the one kind of main value that typically we as Americans tend to value the most, which was freedom.
Mhm. You're exactly right.
Yeah.
And
It's
because
like
because
my
if I have to work multiple jobs just to keep ends meet, well, that is the one thing that I have a limited amount of. And the more of that I have to spend in order just to survive, the less amount of time and resources I have to benefit the world.
And just nurture your own soul, which then gives you the opportunity to benefit the world, gives you the prowess and the open mind to innovate and think and create. Like we are really stifling people by not allowing them to just not get so bogged down with all of the things, the day-to-day like things that they have to do in order just to survive. It really reminds me of something that my grandmother, a story that she loved to talk about when I was a kid, is that when they were living up on the Klamath River, like border of California, Oregon area, and she was like a Girl Scout troop, leader or whatever, and she was taking the Girl Scouts to the theater. She decided she loves the theater, always has, and so she was like, I want to share this with these Girl Scouts, and one of the little girls had a little brother that tagged along, and he was all jazzed about going, but he didn't really get it until he sat down in front of the stage in the audience, and the curtain opened, and there were people standing on that stage who had put in time and effort to prepare a production, a show, a story that they were going to tell him with their skills and their knowledge and their prowess. They were standing there live in person like he took it so personally. He's like, they're doing this for me. Like he was so in awe. But there's so many people in this world who never get to experience that as children or even as adults. And it the things that we learn and the things that we can do with those moments to create a trajectory in our life is incredibly important.
Right. So, like,
That's
historically
wonderful.
speaking, in like back, okay, so it's only been a couple of thousand years since we were hunting and gathering. And, in the last 300, we've only had the minute hand on the clock because of shift work. So our culture and what we've been asked to do has changed much faster than we can possibly evolve. And as a hunting and gathering societies, we used to satisfy all of our needs in about 4 hours a day. And that allowed us, an extra, you know, 8 to 10, 12 hours a day to sit around and think, observe, find patterns in nature and build connections in community. Where, I've had jobs where my short weeks were 120 hours and there's only 178 hours in a week. And so that we cannot expand. But it seems that capitalism is, and the surveillance and time famine capitalism that we're living in is really surviving on the amount of time it can suck away from us.
And leaving no time for sort of chill out, recuperation, just being.
Yeah, because we are human beings. We are not human doings.
Mm-hmm.
But capitalism wants us to be, well, from the wealth of nations, capitalism needs a slave class to function, to exploit. And so we do that by the international trade of going to, other countries that have a lower cost of living where, oh yeah, they can make, tennis shoes to cell phones for a quarter a day. And they're like, this is great. I can feed me and my family. Where we can't even begin to do that. A quarter is, a worthless piece of metal.
It's this myopic, almost, this tunnel vision, right? You're just focused on what you need in the moment. You're not really thinking about the future. You can't, because the society and the situation, socioeconomic situation, is such that you don't have the time for it. You just think about what you need when you need it, and then you're surviving. You're not thriving. You're not really flourishing. Like, the example that Kimberly described, I mean, it makes me think about the socioeconomic status of this child. Be able to have an experience like this that was just deeply, it made a deep impression on him that he'll never forget. But isn't that something that every child should have, right? Have that kind of childlike awe, and be able to experience that, where time and space doesn't really exist for a while. It's just something they can just enjoy in the moment. So I think that shouldn't just be confined to children. That should be for all of us. We should also be able to have those truly human and connecting moments that make life worth living, right? And that's outside of work, and it's outside of capitalism and maximization of profit and productivity and all these things.
Totally,
But just
totally. I mean,
the moments
I
that take our breath away.
exactly. I mean, I'm sitting here surrounded by my little menagerie right now, and my animals like bring me so much joy. And I'm really blessed to be able to. I mean, right now I'm house sitting, but it's interesting because there are there are so many things in life that if you want to be able to do them, it costs money. Like to be a part of certain things and have certain experiences, it costs resources. And if you can't even feed yourself or house yourself, it's basically impossible to get to those next things, right? Like Leslie was saying, the hierarchy of needs.
Well,
Leslie, do you have?
so then
Go
you
ahead, Brian.
haven't had these new experiences, so you can't think differently. So you don't know, and you can't be exposed to how other things might, how how also this world could be constructed or organized or other ways of doing, because our society has done such a great job of putting the blinders on us and saying, if you work hard, and you work long enough, you too can be of this upper class, which, and I'm sure the pyramid masons on the pyramids in Egypt told each other, yeah, if I work hard enough, one day I can afford a pyramid too. Which that is absolutely a gaslit, an absolute cultural lie.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
it's it's something that's very strange. It's very odd to look at because the way our society has functioned for at least the last 100 years, I'd say a little bit longer than that, there's always been a precedent that essentially, like an equation, if you put A and B into this equation, you'll get out C. Now, unfortunately, all of what's happening right now is that there's too many different generations at a certain point in their life where things are not adding up to what they initially projected. So, if generations that are coming through school and are early starting to work, they don't expect within the next 30 years they'll be where their parents were. People who are retiring, so in that case, young people are looking at the future and it looks bad. People who are, say, retired or in that phase of life, they feel like they're not as well set off as people who were their age 20 or 30 years previously. So they're looking in the past and things look bad. So this situation seems like a lot of things are going on that kind of aren't adding up. And unfortunately, like what Kimberly mentioned earlier about joy, an important part of getting even to joy is having safety. And it seemed like, Nick, you had some previous things you were mentioning about how there are some barriers in place that allow people to not even get to safety. What were some of those things?
Yeah.
Yeah, so yeah, one of those things would be physical and health safety, right? There's been recent challenges to safety like COVID, supply issues, like the infant formula shortage that we heard about. I mean, that's just unbelievable to hear that. But there's inflation, there's increasing attention to police violence, increasing gun violence, increasing violent hate crimes and threats, mass shootings that seem to happen on a daily basis. You can't keep up with them.
actually,
There
even
are
more
active
than a
shooters.
daily basis this year. And like,
Yeah.
I was talking to another mom who has a small child. Like, we used to do tornado drills because here in North Carolina, we have them from time to time. The kids, I can't remember what she was doing, but her kindergartner said, "Oh, I think she was getting something that was under a table." And he said, "Oh, do we do shooter drills here too?" I mean, like, he saw her going under a table, and the sense he was the sort of framing he made of it is, "Oh, we do shooter drills everywhere apparently. We do them in school, we practice them in school." Like, okay, so as a counselor, if we're teaching kids that they need to be on alert and ready to do the active shooter drill thing at the drop of a hat, that goes back to what we're teaching them to live with passive lack of safety. That we're teaching them to have a hum always, that they may actively be in literally mortal peril and be ready to act on that from a very, very young age.
And we can't learn when we're in that state. We
We can't
cannot,
connect.
because
We can't
the,
make
the
friends.
difference between the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous system, that's why doctors give so much opiates, is because once you get into the sympathetic nervous system, your parasympathetic nervous system can't heal you. So they have to give us drugs, so then our body goes, oh, okay, I can relax, and now I can start to heal. And so we're literally doing that to our kids all the time. We're keeping them in that sympathetic nervous system. So they can't make good choices. They can't learn what they need to learn. And no wonder we're seeing that, high school and college graduates don't know enough to recreate society in which schools should be doing.
But also, then they can't relax and soothe themselves without the medication.
Right? Well, because they
Yeah,
can't do
the
any other
medication.
coping skill because they have to sit behind a desk and look like they're learning when they're just trying to survive.
Yeah.
Like I'd
Well,
rather
what
be
and
prepared.
Leslie, we're talking about like those active shooter drills, but what about poverty? What does that psychologically have an effect on kids?
This is actually it's a very similar thing. It's this
Mhm.
passive precarity. And so they learn, okay, if we have something right now, we may not have it in 2 seconds. So, we may not have it tomorrow. So if we have cookies, I'm going to pound down every cookie I can get my hands on and happily step on top of my little brother to get it because I don't know when we're going to have this again. or okay, we have this resource, I need to use it all right now because it may not be there when I'm done. So yeah,
It's
it's
kind of a
that.
hard thing to deal with when your brain is developing and you're supposed to be in an ideal world feeling safe and able to experience life and go after the things that like learn like you're supposed to be able to learn, right?
Curious about the
And
world.
you're supposed to be able to be curious and want to be curious and learn and see new things and be awed by the world. You can't do that when you're thinking about your parents providing for you.
So
and and
that all triggered me to that there was an anthropological study about an alienated um, culture, and they were called the Eek. And in the Eek, their whole societal structures had broken down, and what it was to be a good person was one that had a full belly. And if you did not have a full belly, you are not a good person, and you needed to do whatever you needed to do to have a full belly so you could be a good person. And children were not looked after, they were set off on their own because there was not enough resources for them. And it's almost like this whole constraining system is pushing us towards that very nature, that like just as we have to pound them cookies to get them in our belly so we can have the calories so we can go forward and be a good person, and it doesn't matter how you got it.
Well, it definitely embraces more of the traditional survival of the fittest kind of mentality, which ironically was supposed to be a relic of previous pre-civilized times. So that kind of defeats the whole point of having a civilization. So, I mean, in different aspects of pop culture, we kind of romanticize the concept, but everyone forgets that when you think of survival of the fittest, inherently few people survive. That's the whole
Yes.
point of
yeah,
it. The whole point
yeah.
is that only the best of the best should make it.
Right, because where we as a cultural, as humans, feel that we are on the alpha predators. But in all actuality, if you're a naked, alone human in the wild, you are middle of the food chain, literally middle. The only reason we have gotten to where we are is because we've worked together and been able to cooperate in order to
What we've innovated? What?
yeah, right, actually be cooperative and communal. No,
We work
that,
together? What?
no,
Yeah, and part of that working together, I mean, part of that I think has to include people having some relative level of confidence or reliability within institutions. And so it seems like whether it's just your federal government, your state government, your local government, if you're relying on services, anything like that, it seems like that kind of all ties back into one of the points that Nick was making earlier, as it connects to, like in this particular case, the threat of physical violence, which is becoming kind of a constant thing, regardless of, well, I guess let's leave it to the lower 48, regardless of wherever you are, people have that kind of presence in the back of their heads.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think
And
even,
also,
go ahead, Nick.
no, I was just going to say, when we think about other things in terms of physical and health safety, there's another aspect to this, and we're hearing this more and more. There's a relationship of police and law enforcement, citizens, and community. There's a growing lack of trust in institutions. You cited that, Rocky. That we've been taught to count on institutions to just be able to run and have our best interests at heart. But when they are compromised, when they are captured, then that leads to societal decay, and it's a, it's a gradual process that we're experiencing in the United States.
It's also a loop. I mean, one of the things I'm seeing now is that, you know, as people are rightly questioning police procedure and especially around use of force, the police feel unsupported, so a lot of them are quitting. Jurisdictions need bodies, so they will hire any damn warm body who applies. I mean, I know 3 jurisdictions in North Carolina, and the only reason I know 3 is that I happen to know 3 people who are in those jurisdictions. It's not, I haven't seen a study, I've talked to people. They've hired people to be police beat officers who have felonies. They just literally don't have the bodies. They need a body doing the thing. So, which of course is not going to bode well for trust in the community, and things are getting more precarious for everybody. So it's getting dicier for police.
You know, that they need the bodies to administer tickets so that they can keep their revenue stream going.
In some
Yeah,
places.
Well, also, I can see a good thing with this because 25% of Americans have a felony.
Yeah.
Like that's how many people, if just statistically, there's probably more. If they were just sprinkled evenly over the U.S. population, 25% of the population have a felony. Can't vote.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not surprising.
Cannot go on the field trips with their kids. Can't get a good job. So, like, I actually see, like, you know what? I kind of want more felons walking the beat because they know what it's like to be on the other side. And also, they can smell what's happening. And they also realize, unlike most of the police systems in the country, understand that crime is tied to place. So,
Which that's also connected to opportunity and jobs.
Right? So if there's no jobs, well, that situation and that place is ripe for crime to happen.
Yeah.
Well, and so Rocky, you're saying that sort of points me back to what we were talking about before. A lack of opportunity. If you live in a place where there's not good jobs to be gotten, you have to have a way to get to where the good jobs can be gotten. But so you may, you and your whole community may lack opportunity in any real way, just because of where housing prices are such that people can afford them. Yeah.
And also, like, I was just gonna say, like, I know there's stuff to go into around more around like crime and stuff, but on a side note, like certain geos that are low income have a tendency to be in and around areas that have big plants or things that really threaten like the environment, which therefore threatens individuals' health. And we're seeing these kinds of things happen with accidents and disasters on a number of occasions, but literally just the day-to-day operations of some of these spaces really impact the people who live around them. And that often is because the people who have money, they pay those plants to go somewhere else. They don't want to look at them, and they don't want to experience that in their backyard. So they tell them, you go over there where the land is cheaper and the housing is cheaper and the everything's cheaper over there. And so the plant does that. But then they're surrounding all of those individuals who can only afford those types of places with toxic stuff.
Well, and it gets worse. It's not just because they can't afford it. It has been a tradition of redlining.
Yes.
That's where
that has total history. Yeah.
Yeah. So the banks go, this is where we will give you and your kind mortgages. And so it's more insidious. It has been structural
for a long time.
Right. It's
Yes.
up until the 90s where you could actually, where it finally got over where you couldn't put what ethnicity your house was sold to.
Yeah, I mean,
How
it's
weird is
certainly,
that?
yeah, it's certainly, I mean, an ongoing thing, and it's something that people still experience today. Because I mean, there's groups on Facebook where you can go and get people to help you, like especially with your local community, so that you can get like pictures or if you need somebody to come and basically pretend that they live in your house so that you can get it sold. But there are groups that you can go to get that done, so that hopefully you don't get shortchanged on the value of your home, or it's just easier to move on the market. So and now it's not necessarily race. I mean, there's so many different things that also get factored into it too. Whether it's your profession, where you in terms of geographically what county you're from. 'Cause I know at least like in California, that's still kind of a big deal. Like being from LA County versus being from Ventura versus being from Orange County, totally different profile in terms of how people are going to look at you, even though they might only be, say, 10, or depending on where you are within the counties, 10 miles away from each other. It's like night and day.
Yeah.
Yeah, in terms of these socioeconomic factors, right? And as a result of an increase in poverty, we know that violent crime has been on the rise. We see drugstores locking up baby formula these days. I mean, it's ridiculous just how bad it's gotten. And there's U.S. prisons that have the sixth highest population per capita. That's according to study and article, countries with the largest number of prisoners per 100,000 of the national population, and that's as of January 2023, so this year. So we are commoditizing poverty and forcing people to make life-altering decisions out of desperation and fear of death for self or loved ones. And again, that kind of mentality, living with that constantly, that's not going to be conducive to growth and flourishing. It's about survival. It's about just meeting the immediate needs, having that tunnel vision, and like you pointed out, Brian, how it affects us on so many levels, not just mentally but also physically. We can't recover. We're being bombarded, and we can't. Our bodies can't relax. Our
Right.
systems can't relax.
Yeah, so we have one of the lowest life expectancies of any industrialized world. We have this poverty to prison and then poverty in school to prison pipeline. So we have the private prison system is a multi-billion-dollar a year endeavor, and they know who to lobby so they can make sure they continue making money.
Yeah. Well, and our healthcare. So while we have the lowest life expectancy of any industrialized country, we also have the one of the highest costing healthcare systems, which you'd think those two would go together. Like if we invest more money, we'll live longer. No, not here.
No, because like there, I was watching an AOC video, and she was scolding the drug companies because the newest, greatest HIV drug costs $2,000 a month here in the U.S. $2,000 a month to keep somebody alive just in that, and but yet in Australia, it is $8 a month
And you want
for
to
that
know who
life-saving
funded
drug.
the research to develop those drugs?
We did.
The
It wa-
American
right. It
government.
was on, and it was on our tax dollars, our
Yeah.
system. Hmm.
Just like the COVID medications, but
Well,
yeah.
right. So we fund it, but we don't get the profit.
Yeah.
Same with the banks. We carry all the risk, but we don't get the profits.
Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and so many different aspects of our society are operated in that format. I mean, you're going through this situation right now with obviously people kind of touting the situation with Jon Stewart calling out like essentially the Department of Defense in terms of them not passing their audits and not knowing basically like where's the stuff that we're sending to you, where are you spending this money on? And but there's so many different aspects of society that have become commercialized where I guess it's kind of almost transitioning into what we previously always typically associated with like organized crime, where you had a structure, you had an organization that was created for the sole purpose of making money. What impact it had on society was kind of irrelevant because the main point of it was just to make money within whatever industry you're controlling. And then obviously their goal is just to keep that going as long as they don't have any situation dealing with like whatever government's in that area. Now we have transitioned that kind of model, that kind of mentality to aspects of societies where okay, let's get these corporations to run health, to run wellness, to run food, to run transportation, and their number one priority is just making money. How does it impact the greater society? That's something we'll let somebody else worry about down the road when we're no longer even here.
Yeah. And the thing is that when we see things like tax cuts for the rich, that is literally taking money from our overall budget and saying, okay, you guys can have your money back. And if you give a lot of money away to these organizations, these nonprofits, or these schools, or whatever, you could have
Or
you
your
can have
own
even smaller
foundation.
tax bill. Yeah, or your own foundation. the problem with that is that these philanthropists who are incredibly wealthy, they're not paying the taxes, and instead they are contributing this money to these institutions or these organizations, and they're imprinting their will upon these organizations. So instead of the money funneling from them to the government, which is the way it's supposed to go, then to the school or the service or the community center or the library or whatever, right? Those budgets instead get slashed. And that school is now going, well, crap, I need money. And so that school says, well, this guy's going to give us money because he didn't pay his taxes and he really wants to, make sure he doesn't have to get penalized for it. And so he goes ahead and he gives money to that school, but now he's got control over what that school spends the money on. He or she can imprint their will upon how that money is distributed and invested. And it is based upon their opinion, their view of the world and how they want to see things move forward, not necessarily for a greater good purpose or whatever. And sure, they'll get their name on a building, but that money should have funneled through the system and come to that school or that service in a way that allowed everyone to benefit, in a way that allows everyone to flourish and is distributed equitably, not
Or at least some,
these guys
even if it
over
was
here
going to
get this
address,
way because this guy wanted it so.
or even just to address whatever the needs were to begin with. I mean, people might have a logical argument if they could say, hey, whatever the needs are within this school district, at billionaire X is going and he's addressing them directly. Cool, fine. That would be, I mean, rather unusual, but let's just say it happened. The problem with that, though, is that since you're leaving it up to their whim, there is no accountability. This guy's not on the school board. This person doesn't work for the American
He's not
people.
elected. This
Yeah,
person's not elected. Yeah.
it's up to them
Right.
whatever they feel like doing. And so in many cases it may go to having a brand new stadium, which is cool, that's nice, that's awesome, but that doesn't necessarily automatically impact the well-being of the kids in terms of making sure they're prepared for going on to the real world in a few years, or in which will have impacts on what they can do with their lives for the next 100 years, assuming that they have great health.
Yeah. So actually, there's a great movie that illustrates that in great detail with great data, and it was Inequity for All. And so it actually showed how the taxes have changed, which allowed, which then made all the universities, universities used to be free or as cheap as possible, across the country. It's actually in Arizona's constitution that education should be as free as possible. But yet now we're getting to the point where it's as expensive as anywhere else. There's also, what we're also referring to is in sociology, it's called the steel rule of oligarchy. So as human governments have progressed over time throughout history, they approach oligarchy. So those who have the money also have the power because they can bind their position. They can have the resources to lobby for those positions. They have the resources to campaign for those positions. They have the resources to bribe those who are necessary to bribe to get those positions. And we're right there. We no longer live in a representative democracy. We live in an oligarchy.
Yeah.
But so
And it's interesting what you're saying there, because while they're doing that, they're patting us all on the head and saying everything's fine. Look over here, like we're going to sensationalize this precarious situation, this physical safety situation, because we don't want you to think about all this other stuff.
Yep. The Romans figured it out long ago. That as long
Yeah.
people are easily ruled if there's bread and circus.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's exactly where we are with our 24-hour news cycle and all the junk food you could possibly want, subsidized by sugar, which actually makes any food that contains it cheaper.
Yeah.
Yep, back to gaslighting. Seems like we've covered quite a lot here.
exactly, that's exactly what I was thinking. Frankly, we
Right.
were wrapping right around back to the gaslighting. Look, this billionaire is doing good things that they personally chose to do that doesn't actually do the whole thing. Or look, we are placing this small band-aid on this very large gaping wound. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. They can't even begin to stick over fix the wound. Even the
Yeah.
Koch brothers have, bought so many schools and institutions to perpetuate their own word for their organization is called a Leviathan. So just it is insidious as it sounds. Look it up.
Monster. It's literally a monstrosity.
Yep.
Yep.
So is this where we were at?
Capitalism.
Yeah, we covered a lot of territory.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And we'll revisit
we
some
did.
of this again. You know, we can keep talking about all of this for y'all. It's exciting in my mind just to think about all the data out there available. I'm a
And,
data freak.
and and put any questions, concerns, or references in that you'd like to see in the future in the comments, and
Yeah.
we will address as many as we can. Thank you.
Yep. And reach out to us on social media. Nick's got the info there.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Facebook, Twitter, TikTok. Oh yeah.
all the socials.
All the socials, all the things.
Thanks, y'all. This was fun.
That was a great time.
Yes.
Thank you, everyone. Yeah, and you'll see our little website we have that we just it's not a lot right now, but it'll get bigger, and all the things. Join us next time. We'll let you know when that'll happen. Post it up and keep having these amazing conversations about big problems.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank
Don't
you,
forget to
everyone.
be awesome.